Hello and welcome back to From the BON, the Burnley podcast. I'm Simon Evans and with me is Julian Jordan and Tony Dober. Full squad rotation here on the pod as we look ahead to Saturday's game at Anfield against Liverpool and look back a little bit at the last couple of games with Julian and Tony, who haven't been with us to react to those. Gents, thanks for joining us and belated Happy New Year. I think we can still say that at this stage, can't we? But it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's a big game at Liverpool. We go into it on the back of, what you could call a morale-boosting win over Millwall. But, Tony, is there much we can really take from that Millwall game, do you think, either in terms of individual performances or collectively that's going to influence Scott Parker or that we could take into this Liverpool game, do you think?
I think we can take some positives from it in as if you look back at the other games earlier this season, Cardiff, was it, and Derby, and the games going back further previous seasons, I'm looking back as far as Rushden and Diamonds, Accrington Stanley, Port Vale, when we have had played an understrength side and still expected to stroll through, and we've come a cropper badly. We've looked disjointed, and we've looked sort of bereft of ideas, and we've looked disorganised. And I think against Millwall we didn't. We looked like we were up for it. Millwall, that Alex Neil's main focus is on promotion, probably not automatic, but at least to get in the playoffs, and that's very much their focus. And I think they're a bit depleted anyway, so they did have a weakened side. But I was encouraged and I've seen Burnley do that before and look dreadful, and I thought we looked okay. There were a few good performances. Jadon Anthony looks to be coming back to showing a bit of form, and it was generally a good team performance in which they played for each other. We moved the ball reasonably well from back to front. And Millwall couldn't really live, apart from that spell, probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes in the first half when they probably could and should have equalised. We can take a little bit of that because we've had a little run, haven't we? I think we've only lost one of our last 5. Is that right? I think. We've drawn against United, Bournemouth and Everton, beaten Millwall. I think we lost to Newcastle in that spell. So morale was at sort of almost at rock bottom, but it's revived a little bit, and I think that's just the result itself has given us a little bit of a boost. It could all be blown away on Saturday, may well be, but yeah, I think there were a few positive individual performances as well.
Yeah, on that point, individual performances, Julian, who caught your eye in that game, who might have put themselves into Scott Parker's thoughts?
I would agree with Tony. I think there were several performances that caught the eye. Again, I agree, Jadon Anthony looks like, having been rested and come back into the side, it looks like it's done him a world of good, and he seems to have his confidence back, so that's encouraging because we know he's got goals in him. I thought Son had a great performance at right back, and I think, albeit you didn't see a lot of him because of the nature of the game, I thought the bits where Max Weiss was called into action in the goals, I thought he did a cracking job. He seemed to command his area pretty well. I recall him coming out and taking crosses a couple of times. But then the thing that really impressed me was the brilliant reflex save that he made from Cooper, the centre half. The powerful header going back across goal. It looked absolutely goal bound to me. I saw it and I thought, well, that's a goal. And the dive and tip over that he made, I thought was absolutely outstanding. Top draw stuff. And given that, there's a debate about whether or not Dubravka will be with us next season, I thought that was really encouraging because if he's going to get the shirt on the basis of, albeit a limited amount that we could glean from that performance, he looked pretty decent. I think aside from the individual performances, there was a bigger picture thing that I was kind of aware of watching that game, and that is, given that most of us think we probably accept the likelihood is we're going to get relegated this season, you wonder, well, how strong will we be next season? And I think it's difficult to make a case for players being sold for big money in the way, there were 1 or 2 went out last time we got relegated, the likes of Berge or Odebear. You could perhaps make the case for Esteve, and albeit on limited game time thus far, Marcus Edwards, if he continues his form for the rest of the season. But beyond that, you don't really see it. So I would suggest we're going to go down with a fairly strong squad. because of that, I was kind of interested to see how we fare against a team that are riding fairly high in the Championship. Millwall are up there in fifth position, and people could make the case, well, we didn't play a full-strength side and neither did they. There were a number of changes, but in a sense, I think that reinforces my case, because what it tells us is the depth of our squad and the relative strength when you get into the sort of tail end of our squad is light years ahead of a squad that's currently very competitive in the Championship. So I took real encouragement from that, because I think it means if we are to go down, we're going to go down very strong, and you would imagine we'd be very competitive in the Championship this season, this following season.
I mean, you're right, I think, but I don't know. I still feel like we're here in January and we're talking about next season, and relegation being, yeah, it is a likelihood, but are we really not going to do anything in January to see whether we can retrieve this season? Is all hope over? I mean, we had a podcast over the Christmas holidays. I was away in Australia, and the lads did a pod basically saying it's time for Scott Parker to go. Bring in, I think Darren Bentley was saying, bring in Graham Alexander as manager. Greavesy was suggesting Michael Carrick, who of course is now off the market as he's in charge at Man United. All these things being talked about. I mean, whether you agree with them or not, and I wouldn't be getting rid of Scott Parker at this point in time personally, but at least that would be an attempt to sort of try and do something about this season. But with the transfer window and the situation around the manager, it just feels to me, Tony, almost like the club and a large section of the supporters are just accepting that this season's a write-off now. I mean, is something going to happen, do you think?
Well, this is it. This is what's a sort of Damocles hanging over Scott Parker, isn't it? Because you feel as though, and I went to Brighton, and I've been to the last few games. The atmosphere in the last few games has been on almost resignation. There's been a resignation about the squad in some ways. The performances have been a bit lackluster. Maybe until the last 2 or 3 games have been a bit lackluster. The feeling was something's got to be done, and the easiest thing would be to get rid of Scott Parker, which is really unfair on Scott Parker in some ways. But you wonder, we're not going to pull many rabbits. It doesn't look like we're going to pull any rabbits out of the hat in the transfer window, does it? Nobody's really going to catch fire in this squad. Scott Parker might be, if we're going to not give up on this season, Scott Parker going to be the sacrificial lamb, but I don't think he is. I think they're going to looking now like they're going to stick with Scott Parker now, doesn't it? He's looking very much like that's the case. So it's not it's a no-win situation, whatever we do, really. But I was just thinking that people were urging for Scott Parker to go, just in the meaning we have to do something, and that was the easiest thing that springs to mind.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on it, Julian? Because I tend to agree with Tony there. I think he would be like the sacrificial lamb, and I'm not sure it would work. But what's because I've not seen anyone out there particularly who can come in and very quickly get much more out of this squad without getting support in the January transfer window. Maybe there is, you never know. Somebody comes in with super motivational powers or a tactical genius and can get more out of the side. But what's your feeling? Because that Parker out mood has grown, and it seems to be fairly settled amongst a large section of the support. What's your feelings on it?
Well, I agree. I think there is a significant section of the support that probably would like to see a change, but I think it's a polarised support, because I think there are a similar number of us that are not supportive of the idea of change right now, and I'm Parker in. I would have to say. I think, beside the fact that I think he's proved himself not just at Burnley but previously, that he's certainly at Championship level a very, very good manager. And, maybe he's not quite there in terms of being a Premier League manager, but that's us as a club. You could level that as us generally. We've sort of we've got yo-yo status, haven't we? So we've proved to be a bit too good for the Championship in recent years and not good enough for the Premier League. I think if the board were considering seriously to get rid of him, they would have had those thoughts several weeks ago, and they'd have acted then, because it would be completely irrational, I think, to keep a manager as you go into a window. If you're going to get shut, you get shut early or mid-December, you give a new manager an opportunity to make an assessment of the squad, and then you can decide what you're going to do in the window. To change at the end or in the middle or towards the end of the window seems to me to be completely irrational. I genuinely think Scott Parker is a good manager, and I think he's proven as such. And I said this on Radio Lancashire on Monday night. I think that the way he conducts himself and the way he speaks, you don't just get the impression that he's a good manager. I get the genuine feeling that he's a good person too. And so I'm perfectly happy to stick with him. I think there are lots of reasons why we're struggling this season, and relatively few of them you'd say Scott Parker's fault. He's not above criticism. I think the point's been made on the pod previously. It's taken us nearly half a season to get Marcus Edwards into the side, and it was clear for some time that we lacked. When I was speaking to you previously on the pod, I talked about this notion of connective tissue. That sort of connection that takes us from promising movement in midfield to actually getting into the final third and creating a chance. And he seems to have given us that since he's come into the side. So that's one criticism you could level at him.
Tony?
Yeah, can I just make one point, Sam? Quite an interesting point about there's a guy who I work with who's a Leeds United supporter. He knows his stuff. He's a former non-league semi-professional player, but he does follow Leeds to some away games as well. Look back at Leeds United a few weeks ago when they were struggling, and Daniel Farke was on the verge of being sacked, wasn't he? Let's not beat about the bush. Just before they had this nightmare run, they weren't much different to us. And he decided to go long and put Calvert-Lewin up front to play the long ball to Calvert-Lewin, and hey presto, it's worked. And the last half a dozen games they've been flying. They've pulled away from the relegation zone, not with any signings or anything like that. With a manager who was on the verge of the foul. I thought the crowd had turned, and things are all hunky dory at Ellen Road now. It pains me to say that, but that's the case. It's very unlikely, but I'm saying this because Leeds United looked to be lost, or Farke looked to be lost, and suddenly he's found a winning formula.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that something like that does happen. It just doesn't feel like it's going to do with us, though, does it? I mean, Edwards has unlocked a few things. Brozier does look to have grown into it, and after making a very slow start to time at Turf Moor. But it's hard to see if something could click for Scott Parker, and there might be something like what happened at Leeds United. I just can't see what it might be.
I'm going back to that turning point at West Ham, Simon, when we looked fairly comfortable with 1-0 up, and then we conceded just before half-time. If we wouldn't have conceded then, 5-10 minutes into the second half, the crowd were already turning against West Ham. We could easily have ridden that out with a 2-0 win, and then that would have set us on our way. But that was a real turning point towards a downward spiral. I know it's a lot harder to get an upward spiral for a club like ours in the Prem, but you never know. I know we're getting into the realms of you never know rather than any real possibility, but it's not over yet.
It's not, no, but I still think if there is a chance that something happens and Parker finds some magical combination that can unlock Premier League defences, and that we start defending a lot better as a team as well, obviously. But it still feels like we might need to bring someone in January, and there's not really much indication of that happening. Now, admittedly, it is a quiet window across the Premier League as a whole so far in January. January tends to be a window where everything gets done at the last minute, and a lot of loan deals and people taking a punt on players and so on. There have been one or two rumours. Gus Hamer at Sheffield United is one player that's been mentioned. Ross Barkley, possibly as a loan coming in from Aston Villa, has also been mentioned. There's Andre Ilic, a Serbian striker with Union Berlin, who not a particularly prolific striker, which might put him higher up our shortlist, given our track record with strikers. But is there any of those names there, Tony, captures your imagination and makes you think that they'd be a player worth thinking about?
Not particularly, I have to say, not particularly, really. I'm just thinking about the defence, and that's always the key to survival for a club like ours, having a solid defence. You know, when we had the triangle of Ben Mee, Tarkowski, and Tom Heaton behind it, and then we had, I mean, even last year we had Trafford and Esteve and Egan Rowell, that solid triangle in the middle. There were just a few signs, though, that I think Humphreys and Esteve look like they might be possibly a partnership. And I think Walker, if that's the case, it takes the pressure off Walker a little bit. But the worry for me is at left back, where Hartman's showed very little so far. He's looked out of position a lot of times. My son always picks up on that. He said Hartman's out of position because he played left back anyway when he was a kid, kind of thing. And he said he's out of position a lot. And Perez is you can add Perez to this long list of attacking fullbacks who can storm down the wing. But defensively, they're not up to it. I don't think Perez is he's quite skillful, but I don't think he's quite up to it defensively in the Premier League. I think the key, hopefully for us, would be if we can find I can't name anybody, but if we can find a pretty solid left back, that might just give us a chance of a bit of defensive solidity and give us a shout.
Humphreys can play left back, of course. I mean, so if we're saying that left back is a position that we need to be thinking about strengthening, and I agree about Hartman and Perez, but Humphreys, although he's looked quite good playing in a central defensive position, played left back for us in the Championship, didn't he, and looked pretty decent there. So that might be another option. In terms of players that are on the way out or already on their way out, Manuel Benson, that was a strange one this week. He's on loan at Swansea City, not been featuring a lot, went to the African Cup of Nations with Angola, and I don't think featured a lot there either. Swansea returns to Swansea, and Swansea asked Burnley, we'd like to cut short our season-long loan because they're obviously paying the wages of a player who's not getting into their side and their manager doesn't rate. Burnley refuse to cut short the loan. And Manuel Benson now is stuck on whatever arrangement for his wages, but he's stuck at Swansea City for the rest of the season. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, that, Tony, but what do you make of it?
It's looking a bit like the Zaroury case all over again, isn't it? And Zaroury was fantastic up till he went to the World Cup. And then when he came back from the World Cup, the tail end of that glorious company promotion season, he didn't do a lot then and he faded even more. He's at Panathinaikos now, I think, is he? Zaroury, but I don't know how he's doing there particularly, but he just seems to have tailed off. And Benson, I mean, you'd think if Benson did show some quality for us, you'd think he would show some quality for a fairly ordinary Swansea side, but clearly he hasn't done. So it's a worrying situation. He comes back, he could be like Delquois. I didn't know Delquois was still with us, wasn't he? But when Delquois just left, but he was still with us, wasn't he, for the whole season?
Yeah. Just sat there.
It's quite worrying. It's quite worrying, really. Yeah.
I mean, my point about it not making sense is really that, okay, he's clearly not got a future at Burnley, so we've loaned him out to Swansea City, presumably hoping it gets him in the shop window and we can then sell him. I don't think it was a case of trying to get Benson back and get him back into the side. But if he's not playing at Swansea, his value's going to be falling, whatever value he has left. But also, he's not in the shop window. He's less and less likely to be picked up by anyone. Why not bring him back, loan him to somebody else, loan him to somewhere in Europe? I mean, what's the point of saying no to Swansea and forcing Swansea to keep him, against their will for half a season? I mean, he's better off going back to Europe. I think he's a player who's, I think, that talent he's got and the skill he's got, he's just better suited to playing in a European league that's much less physical than England, I think, because he is fragile. He gets injured a lot and gets pushed off the ball quite a lot, doesn't he? So it's a shame, really, because he did do so well. But it's similar in some respects to the Koleosho situation, where he wasn't featuring at Espanyol on a loan deal there. We've recalled him from that loan in order to then loan him out to Paris FC, who beat Paris Saint-Germain in the French Cup during the week. I'm not sure if Koleosho featured in that game. I don't think he started anyway. But,
He came on for the last half hour, I think.
Yeah, Koleosho at least, it wasn't working for him at Espanyol. He's now playing at Paris. He's getting some football. I don't know how much of his wages we're still paying. Usually with these loans deals, the mother club is still committed to some part of the salary. But at least Koleosho's in the shop window. Benson's just going to rot away at Swansea, isn't he, Tony, there for half a season?
It would appear so. It's at least he's not taking up a squad place for us, is he? So that's a consolation. But it's a puzzling situation. It's been poorly managed by the club, you have to say. Among a few other things that have been poorly managed by the club in this season. We have done some good things, but it's just a mess, isn't it, at the moment? And yeah, like I say, he's not going to feature, is he? Espanyol, could he go to Espanyol, do you think? I don't think he'd get a game there, would he?
No. I think he's got returning to a smaller club in the Belgian league written all over him, I think, Manuel Benson, to be honest. Another potential outgoing, and this is a rumour that's been flying around today, is French club Nice interested in Ekdal. He's a funny player, Ekdal, isn't he? Because he looks absolutely class sometimes. And against Millwall, he's going forward like we saw. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be losing him, really, do we, ideally? Even though he's not probably a guaranteed starter.
Yeah, I mean, he only came cheap, didn't he, Ekdal? It wasn't a big money signing.
No.
So the board, if they got a reasonably juicy offer, 4 or 5 million, they might be tempted to cash in. But yeah, I think he's a classy player, and people keep talking about his lack of pace. But I've seen him chase back a couple of times this season, and he's not been found wanting for pace. He's been okay. I mean, I'd back him to beat Joe Worrell over 50 metres, would you not?
Yeah, probably, yeah. Yeah. And Twanzebe's not fit most of the time, is he? So, he's the other central defender we've got, but he's constantly throughout his career had injury problems, unfortunately. Just finishing off then, let's look a little bit at the Liverpool game. There's a couple of selection issues. Tony, you mentioned this to me off air about Hannibal and that Manchester United game. You wanted to get that off your chest. Go on.
I do want to get it off my chest. It's been bugging me for a few days, this, and I was annoyed at Brentford because I didn't think it was that much of a dive at Brentford. I was at Brentford, and we all know that Hannibal's not the player. Once he's got a yellow card, which he generally does get in the first 20 minutes, he's not the same player. But against Man United, I was standing near the front of the cricket field stand, and that when he was booked for that push. That dive, for a push. I mean, I could clearly see a hand on his back. Fair enough, he made a meal of it. I'm not denying that. But who doesn't? Bruno Fernandes was on the park, for goodness sake. And I let out one of them, them sarcastic cheers that fans give out after when we haven't got a free kick for 20 minutes. I let out one of them and said, hey, at last we've got a decision, a just decision. And then this bloke behind me said, oh, he's been booked for diving. I thought, well, he did. Somebody did put a hand on his back, for goodness sake. And then I look at some of the decisions that have been made against us. Was it Diallo at Man United when he defied the laws of physics and biology within a few seconds? He was pulled back and then he sprang forwards, which defies most of Newton's laws of physics, to get into the area. And then he was rolling about, and then he sprung up and ran 50 yards to the referee, say, how about a penalty? And the referee couldn't wait to give it. And yet, all Burnley fans said was, on our forums were, Anthony, a bit of a head loss by Anthony. And I thought, well, we were filled out of that. That was that game. And then when I look at Hannibal, what he did, and then I look at the forum afterwards, and they're all going, oh, we've got to get rid of Hannibal. He's a liability. Well, to me, I know he's a hothead, and he's done some daft things. That stamp against Stoke was ridiculous. But we need that fire. We need somebody. I think Hannibal was one of the keys to us getting a point against United, because early on he does look like he's got that belief. He looks like he's going to have a go. We're going to do these lot. We need people out there who's going to, at Liverpool. If we turn up at Liverpool, think, we'll keep it respectable, 2 or 3. We'll let them play, and we'll get away with 2 or 3. That's no good for us. That's no good for me as a Burnley fan. I want to see people like Hannibal clattering into people. If he puts Ekitike in the stand, that's fair enough for me. We've got that will to win, and I think he really has. He has got, and he's got some quality quality as well. And I'm just frustrated with Burnley fans for sort of getting on his back for that. He didn't do anything that nobody else, a load of players against us haven't done in the past. I'm really frustrated about that because I like Hannibal. I think he's got quality. He showed quality for Birmingham against us when I went to St Andrews that midweek game, and he showed some quality. And he's just got that something that we need, that belief to rattle the opposition a bit. And I've earned a slot thinking, oh blimey, I don't want a couple of my best players grokked by this nutcase. He's just somebody who can give us something to think about, and I'm just really frustrated. I was really frustrated about that booking at the time, because I thought he was the one who was making us tick against United. I'm delighted we got a client, but I'd like to see him play at Anfield and just try and shake things up a bit. My son made a point in that we were talking about this, and I was trying to get, because I was really frustrated at the time. My son made the point that when Joey Barton came, Sean Dyche had him on a tight leash, didn't he? And he was good as gold. Chris Bowden said at the time, all the time he was at Turf Moor, he was good as gold. Is that a fault of Scott Parker that he's not got Dyche's gravitas sort of thing? Dyche had that ability to get the best out of a loose cannon. There's no looser cannon than Joey Barton. Dyche had that ability to calm him down, and he got the very best out of him at Burnley. Is it a fault of Scott Parker that he's not getting the best out of Hannibal? I don't know. What do you think? Is it worth risking him as an impact sub? Maybe.
Oh, he's done quite well as an impact sub, hasn't he? Yeah, you could see him having that role at Anfield, I think. Let's leave it at that. It's going to be a tough one on Saturday. Let's see what we can get out of it. We'll be back with a rapid reaction after that game at Anfield, and then a debrief on Sunday for Monday. Until then, thanks very much indeed for Julian and Tony for joining us and battling through a few technical problems today that hopefully we managed to iron out before you see this. But we will look forward to joining you again soon, and up the Clarets.